Our issue segment tonight, President Obama finally admitted that his administration underestimated ISIS, but that doesn't erase the fact that he said climate change is the greatest national security threat facing our nation. The idea is simply patently absurd, but that kind of rhetoric channeled into economically stifling legislation and regulations, it stops now. President-elect Donald Trump appointed Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt to run the EPA, which I interpret as a strong message to our nation and the world that President Obama's radical climate change agenda is a thing of the past. Joining me now, climate realist, author of ClimateDepot.com, and producer of the documentary Climate Hustle, Marc Morano. Marc, thanks for being here.
Hi, Liz. Happy to be here. Thanks.
It's good to see you again. All right, Marc, what's your quick reaction? Scott Pruitt as EPA head.
Donald Trump keeps a major campaign promise. I mean, this is what he campaigned on. And even last night in Iowa, he mentioned again about reining in the EPA. This pick of Scott Pruitt is the defining pick when it comes to climate and energy, because Scott Pruitt, as Attorney General, has been battling the EPA climate rules, which, even if you believe Al Gore and the United Nations, could have no impact on the climate because they don't even impact global CO2 levels. So we're shutting down the entire coal industry, going after American energy to do absolutely pure symbolism for the climate. So Donald Trump's pick for EPA is a shot across the bow. And as you can imagine, the environmental left and the media is freaking out.
Right. Plus, I kind of like the idea of a man who's currently suing the EPA becoming the head of that agency.
It sends exactly the message you want to send. When you want to come in and try to drain the swamp, this is what you want to happen. In fact, you don't even have to look into Scott Pruitt. All you have to do is turn on CNN, and, for instance, today and yesterday, and watch Chris Cuomo, Mario Cuomo's son, go off about how skeptics are akin to people who don't want interracial dating or equality for African Americans. They're off on tangents. They are calling him an existential threat to the safety of our planet, this new EPA pick. So all you have to do is look at the opponents of the Trump administration and realize this is a great pick.
Right. Liberal logic is hard sometimes for them. I think the crux of the matter here is they're upset. Liberals are upset because Pruitt wrote, and this is a quote from him, that the debate on climate change is far from settled. And just writing that the debate is not yet settled, writing that there still needs to be investigation into it, that's enough to break down their narrative.
It is, and that's a very mild way of putting it. As you know, in the film Climate Hustle, I actually have scientists, Nobel Prize winners, former United Nations, who come out in much stronger language than this and just say, this is an outrage that this is being allowed to continue. One scientist just came out last week and said if this were a different branch of science, it would have been abandoned long ago, the idea that man is driving a climate catastrophe. So, and the thing about Scott Pruitt is he's a man with the means, the history, the methods. He's got a strong character. He's been enduring these attacks for years from opponents. So he's not someone untested. And he is perfectly positioned to come in and keep Donald Trump's campaign pledge, start reining in the EPA. Remember, President Obama did all of these regulations through the EPA by bypassing democracy. They couldn't pass them through Congress, the climate bill. So he decided to do an executive order. And that's what Pruitt is going to be dealing with as EPA chief, whether CO2 is a pollutant. In other words, do humans, who we inhale oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide, are we pollution machines according to the EPA? And hopefully he'll restore sanity to our science.
Well, hopefully, but you know what they say, that's the risk of executive orders, easy to pass, easy to repeal. I think, like I said, the crux of the matter here is this puts the climate change agenda of the left at risk because the science, if you look at the science, which they don't, it doesn't back up their assumptions. And their assumptions are what they're using to pass these rules and regulations in the agencies that lead to this devastating impact on our economy, this control by the left.
Yes, and one of the things that's so difficult, it was an executive order, but once these executive orders get sort of implemented, then you have judges backing them up. It becomes sort of the de facto policy of the government. They are actually difficult. Like one of the things that may have to be done is you're going to have to convene either a presidential commission, an EPA board to re-examine carbon dioxide, which everyone on the skeptical side would welcome an actual scientific debate. Because the EPA used a lot of the United Nations science, which we now know from the ClimateGate scandal and all the leaked emails, that basically it was a giant lobbying organization, a science panel masquerading, it was a political organization masquerading as a science panel, creating a narrative. So we can break back open that science and change that. So there's going to be a lot of court cases. There's going to be a lot of fights. They're saying this EPA chief could be facing what Robert Bork under Ronald Reagan faced, the most vicious confirmation hearings in the history of of the United States, at least since Robert Bork. They're that upset. They're going to put everything they have after him.
Right. I don't think just him. I think it's going to be, these confirmations are going to be quite interesting to watch. There's even some rumors that the Democrats are planning to drag them out 36 hours each. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. Marc, before we're out of time here, at the same time that Scott Pruitt was appointed by President-elect Trump, Ivanka Trump met with Al Gore, and Trump himself met with Leonardo DiCaprio. Marc, imagine you were a fly on the wall there. What kind of conversation could have even happened in those meetings?
Well, one of the late night comedians actually said, if you want a copy of Leonardo DiCaprio's new film, go to Trump Tower's dumpster behind it, because he gave one to Donald Trump to watch. They're saying that's probably where it ended up. The LA Times actually had an article today saying that Al Gore was played by Donald Trump. And I think Donald Trump is being a brilliant strategic businessman. He's coming in and he's meeting with his foes. He's reaching out to former foes like Mitt Romney, but he's keeping his campaign promises. And people aren't used to that in Washington.
No, they certainly aren't. Marc, one last thing. If you were talking to President-elect Trump right now, advising him on what you consider the one or two most pressing things that need to be addressed in relation to climate change or in relation to the EPA, quickly, what would you say?
I would say the number one thing to do is overturn the EPA executive orders that basically, by presidential fiat, shut down the entire coal industry and are going to be regulating and centrally planning and stuffing out our energy and raising electricity costs. And the second thing is very simple: pull out of the United Nations climate agreement. That has no interest in the United States. It plays right into Donald Trump's philosophy of America first. We don't want global governance. We don't want wealth redistribution pioneered by the United Nations. It does nothing for the climate. It's just a big boondoggle. So those two things, overturn the EPA executive order, withdraw from the UN agreement, that's the two most important things.
Well, there you go. Maybe Donald Trump will see this and take action on those. Marc?